Mr. Chair, go ahead.
Right. We'll call the meeting of the Planning Commission to order this September 20th, 2023. If staff could call roll, please.
Robert Estrada,
Here.
Brian Parsons. He was here,
Yes.
technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Ryan Pearson,
Here.
Don Daniels.
Here.
You have quorum.
Great, thank you. We have before us the minutes of September 6, 2023. Looking for a motion.
Make a motion to accept the minutes as written.
We have-
Second.
and Mr. Pearson made a motion first and Mr. Estrada made a motion second. Any changes? No? All those in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Hearing none. Minutes passed as written for September 6, 2023. Any changes to our agenda tonight?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. At this time, we'll open up public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on any subject tonight, you're able to do that. We do have one person, I believe, signed up, but if that individual online is here on public hearing to speak, you can wait for testimony to be recorded on that. Other than that, you're able to speak tonight on any subject under public comment. We have no one in the audience tonight. So online,
So
Maria?
I'm sorry, Maria Tobin, if you're wishing to testify as part of the public hearing, that will come shortly. This is for all other topics.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. So you're going to wait until the public hearing, Maria?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, great. Thank you. So then at this time, we will close the public comment period. And we'll move along to number 6, the public hearing of 2023 annual development regulations. Ms. Spear.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just bringing this up really quickly. And then as you had last time, it's kind of a joint presentation by Jessica Olson, current planning manager, and myself. And I will turn it over to Jessica to begin. I'll advance your slides.
All right, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. So just a refresher, we went through these at the September 6th meeting. And then we're here to take action tonight. Go ahead on the next slide. So I'm just going to quickly kind of go through and remind you which amendment is which. Amendment number 1 is the one for, am I too close or too far away? Standalone truck parking allowed in the industrial zones. This one is proposed as a conditional use permit for the IBP, I1 and I2 zone classifications. And it does establish the truck trailer parking as a use type, as standalone from any other business. Amendment 2 is the electric fencing expanded to commercial zones, so it would be permitted with the same restrictions as the it is now in the industrial zone. So that includes C1, C2, C3, and TOC. Amendment 3 further defines unusual use and clarifies that it is something that realistically you couldn't think of to put in the code so that we can find a similar use and should not be used for uses that are just unusual circumstances. Next one. Amendment 4 corrects some inconsistencies between the subdivision code and the development regulations. So it's going with the subdivision code requirements, when it's relating to binding site plan amendments, plat alteration, short plat amendments. And it also takes on the review authorities and timeframes already set for similar other subdivisions. Amendment 5 just updates the sign permit administration. It moves the administration sections to 18820 with the rest of our administration. And then it removes any out of date stuff that's in the sign code. Amendment number 6 updates our SEPA appeal timeframes to all be consistent with each other and the state laws. And so that sets them at 14 days when it's standalone SEPA and 21 days when it's in conjunction with another land use decision. Amendment 7 clarifies that flex space buildings, the uses within them still have to be allowed in the zone. Amendment 8 takes out some confusing setup in the use tables related to mobile home parks. It doesn't change the way that they're implemented. Amendment number 9, again, clarifies that there is a minimum lot size for single family in the MR2 zone, and it keeps the same 3,000 gross square foot requirement. Amendment 10 will do some clarification, and there is some information in your packet about this. We looked at the, Tiffany, very good, pointed out that the APZs are accident potential zones, and that's what the AC and zones were based on in the clear zone. They're a little weird because it's a flight path, and so they're not perfectly aligned with the AC zone. So we did want to clarify that. We added some language in the text itself to say, you know, they don't match up perfectly, but the intent is for them to be essentially covering in a logical geographic pattern, the same area as the accident potential zones.
And then I'll step in for the last two. Amendment 11 is regarding expanding where commercial childcare facilities will be allowed in the city of Lakewood. If you recall, this is because of the evidence of a childcare desert in many parts of the country, actually. And as the name implies, and we've come to know food deserts, this is the same concept where there's simply not enough services available for the need. And there are childcare deserts here in the city of Lakewood. And so this would allow them outright in the R1 through R4, MF3, neighborhood commercial 1 and 2, transit-oriented commercial, and the central business district zones outright, and then with a conditional use permit in the arterial residential commercial and the C3 zones. So this is an increase up to a little over half of all of the city's land coverage, where as of right now, it's only in 4% of the city. The final amendment is talking about the prohibition of using accessory dwelling units as short-term rentals in the city. This is where there was the most conversation at the last meeting. And in your packet for this evening, there is additional information about why city staff is continuing to recommend to the commission that this be a prohibition. The state legislature, first of all, said this is something that the city can do, which is prohibited, because the idea here is to increase the supply of affordable housing. That's why 1337 was adopted primarily by the state legislature. Quickly, this is some language straight out of the bill that talks about, again, why this bill was passed, the housing affordability crisis, the fact that you can have more affordable housing at smaller sizes, correcting for past economic and racial exclusion issues in single-family zones, and ADUs are often rented below market rate. In addition, providing additional housing for the growing senior population. And then down at the bottom is the legislature intends to promote and encourage the creation of ADUs as a means to address the needs for affordable housing options. And then you have language in a couple of other spots from different articles or expert groups, if you will, talking about how short-term rentals have actually affected rental housing markets in certain places where there are absentee landlords. And that is one issue that we anticipate could happen here in Lakewood. So again, the city staff continues to recommend a prohibition. However, what we do have here is, an option if you wanted to consider it, maybe take action on it, maybe not. But if you did want to continue to suggest having short-term rentals allowed in Lakewood, first of all, understanding that short-term rental by definition is rental for a total of 30 days or less at any one time. And then in addition to that, the owner of the parcel must be in one of the units while something is being used as a short-term rental. And where you have there being more than one ADU on a site, you would have to have on-site adequate parking for all of those ADUs, the primary residence, et cetera. And then the limit would be using it as a short-term rental for no more than 30 days per year. So that's an option, again, for you to discuss. We are here tonight. Originally, we were suggesting action this evening. However, we moved this timing out because of the conversation on that particular topic. You're welcome to take action tonight, but we are at this point scheduled that you could take action at the next meeting, and then it is moved on future down the road for the city council to take action as well. So with that, Mr. Chair, happy to answer questions or head over to the public hearing.
Mr. Pearson?
I had a question about, the language, if we were to strike out the clause about not allowing short-term rentals for the ADUs, is that against the law, or is that just against the intent of it?
What
Does it say that you shall not do this, or?
No, no. House Bill 1337 says you will allow more ADUs across the board, right? On all the lots that you can, if there's not critical areas or other reasons not to do so. What the bill has in it is explicit language saying you can prohibit it to be used as a short-term rental. And what the city staff is recommending to the commission and council is that is something Lakewood does. The planning commission, however, you have the authority, the purview to say, we recommend allowing short-term rentals. And then it's up to the council to take that under advisement and whatever action they will.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Estrada?
For an ADU, according to what I read here, it can be no larger than 1,000 square feet.
Mhm.
And the Amendment 9 shows the residential area dimensions. So if a building is already at 35%, then that particular site cannot be used for an ADU because it would exceed the lot size specification. That's the way I'm reading it. Is that correct?
Go ahead. Yeah, please.
So the 3,000 minimum lot size is how small you can go. It's not you required to be that small. So say you did have a lot that was 3,000 square feet. If you had, a smaller building on it, you could do a smaller ADU as well, but it just depends on how the makeup of that site is and how the person chooses to develop it. If they want multiple units or not, they could do smaller units. And that's just one zone in the plethora of zones that we have. And it is one of the smaller minimum lot sizes.
Okay, I'm looking at the amendment and I need a clarification, please. For example, R3 says building coverage is at 45%. That's max. So if I'm already at 45%, then I cannot have an ADU because that would exceed the code.
Right, yes. So there are limitations if you've already covered too much of the surface. So we have both the impervious surface limitations as well as building. And so oftentimes the building will actually be smaller than the impervious. So you can have some level of patio and things like that. And so if you're already at that level, you can't do more. You could go up potentially, but I don't
you
know
could
that
go
anybody would do that.
So if anybody wanted to, they first need to meet these specifications. So they have to be clear through the planning.
Yeah, there's much more layers
Yeah,
than just
okay.
allowing the
Understand.
1,000 square feet. Yes.
Okay. And again, just one more question, just to clarify a former comment. So the intent of 1337 was to provide for low-income housing.
Correct. It was.
And therefore, if we allow short-term rentals, then we are, one perspective, circumventing the intent of 1337.
That's the city's staff position. Yes. The idea here is along with 1110, which is all of the middle housing requirements. Now that the city has, 2 or 4 units per lot, depending how close you are to transit. Couple that with the ADU bill 1337. The whole reason the state legislature did that was to say, we recognize we need so many thousands of units in the next 20 years. This is a way to do it without suddenly having to increase land capacity. We can do it on existing lots. So the city is saying if that is the intent and that is where the city is going to go, we would recommend not going with short-term rental allowance because by doing that, you're taking it out of this sudden new stock of affordable housing.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Any other questions? Mr. Parsons?
Yeah, going back to Amendment 11 for the childcare and daycare, are there any requirements? Right now it's conditional. We're going to go permitted use. Is there anything for neighbors if there are, if it's 13 or more kids in there? all during the day? Is there noise requirements or other things that people have to adhere to so that it doesn't impact the neighbors who are already in that area?
Yes, there are business licensing requirements and the use itself requirement on the property if you're at that level of intensity.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, Mr.
Not a question, but a comment on the Amendment 12. So I have a friend who's in the business of short-term rentals and long-term rentals. And that's really an avenue as part of their business plan is they'll take some ADUs that they develop and start them off as short-term rentals. And once they've kind of been used a bit and they're not so, trendy and fresh and nice, they'll transition them to long-term rentals. And so, it's really, I think, a pretty good way to, maybe allow someone some flexibility to ultimately get to a long-term rental with, just having some options, some doors open. So just a comment.
Yes, Mr. Estrada.
I'm trying to picture. So I am low income and I need affordable housing. But this particular home will only allow me to stay in there for 10 months because they're going to use that particular home for short-term rental for 2 months of the year. Therefore, I, as a homeless, am I going to jump to this place for 10 months knowing I have to leave? And then maybe I'll be available 2 months later and then come back? Again, from my perspective, we're just trying to circumvent the intent of this 1337.
All right, we do have Maria Tobin. If you're willing in here for public hearing, we'd like to hear your comments.
Good evening, Chairman Daniels and the Lakewood Planning Commission. Yes, I would love to provide my comments. My name is Maria Tobin. I'm the program coordinator for the Southtown Military and Communities Partnership, or SSMCP. Since I know that you are very familiar with SSMCP, I won't belabor who we are, but I am here today on behalf of SSMCP to show our support for the adoption of Amendment 11 to the Lakewood's Comprehensive City Plan, as it reduces unnecessary barriers for commercial childcare expansion to a significant portion of the city. SSMCP is focused on this issue because after several years of working to expand affordable childcare and even getting a DoD subsidy for military families, the fact remains that the community demand far exceeds the childcare capacity for Pierce Thurston County, putting us right in the middle of what the state classifies as a childcare desert, as Ms. Spear has already referred to. After learning from our partners that commercial childcare zoning has been a real issue for childcare providers to expand, we asked the Lakewood planning team to take a look at its current allowance for outright permitted childcare and then its ability to increase its total permittable area. The reason for our request was pretty simple. Looking at Pierce County and even further at Lakewood, we noticed that in the middle of these childcare deserts are a spattering of areas with adequate childcare. As we took a deeper dive into these pockets, we saw a commonality connecting most of them, leading us to believe that adequate childcare can exist where it is allowed to be fully permitted. And this makes sense to us when you consider that providers in this region have reported to pay up to $10,000 for a zoning permit and related requirements. Other providers have said that the cost of satisfying unnecessary and excessive conditional use requirements simply prohibited them from expanding their commercial child care center in both Pierce and Thurston counties. Before we go any further, I do want to make one point for clarification. SSMCP does fully recognize that the deficit of childcare that our community faces does have many contributing factors. But with that said, we do believe that removing unnecessary zoning restrictions is a critical component to childcare expansion, which not only benefits our families of young children, but it also helps our local businesses getting adequate staffing. And it's also imperative for good workforce development and a strong economy. SSMCP's impetus for this advocacy results from more than 70% of our military personnel and their families are living off the installation and in our communities like Lakewood. These folks rely heavily on essential community services such as childcare to maintain the basic needs for their households, often necessary for our junior enlisted service members and their families living in Lakewood with no other support networks. By our calculations, using the Defense Enrollment Eligibility Reporting System, Lakewood is home to more than 2,000 active duty military kids. In closing, it's widely known that a good comprehensive community plan directly influences the provision of adequate services within our communities. However, many jurisdictions, both in the South Sound and nationwide, as been said before, do lack land availability for commercial childcare due to unnecessary zoning restrictions. I would love to see the city of Lakewood, who is both the executive and fiduciary agent to SSMCP, make this monumental change to expand childcare within your borders. I just want to express my gratitude to the city of Lakewood Planning Manager, Jessica Olson, and their strategic long-range planning manager, Tiffany Spear, for working with me on this proposal of this amendment, expanding childcare to a significant portion of the city. By doing so, the city of Lakewood would be taking both a progressive and a sensible approach to expanding commercial childcare. I want to thank you for the opportunity to show my support for this amendment, and I'll stand by for any questions.
Great. Thank you so much for your comments. Yes, much needed. No question about it. So any questions for Maria at this time? I think not. So thanks again for your comments and all your efforts. All right. So we have these amendments before us. I do have just one other question then on number 12.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to put in perspective, if a homeowner wants to build these ADUs, the cost of these ADUs, that's in consideration. How are they, to recoup their money? And we talked about these young families, young officers, I should say, military personnel here for the need. They're usually having multiple military individuals partner in apartments and stuff like that. It costs to build these things under all the requirements. They're gonna have to rent they're called rentals,
Correct.
basically. Not too many are gonna build them for mother-in-laws or family. We wouldn't have very many success stories if that's the only thing they could use them for. So I'm still contemplating on of short-term rentals. But I just thought that they have to recoup their money for building these, and without building them and having the availability, we're defeating our purpose for even having them. So that's just kind of my comments of that. So before us, we do have these 2023. So at this time, though, I will close the public hearing. Since no other comments or no other individuals waiting online and no one in the audience tonight, so we will close the public hearing at this time. So before us, we can digest what we've heard. We can make recommendations to the council at this time, or we can wait until our next meeting that is on the agenda to make those things. So I'd like to hear from the commissioners, Mr. Pearson.
Yep. We have 3 other commissioners that are absent, so I think it'd be good to hear from the whole group and just push us off until the next meeting.
Okay.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
Mr. Estrada?
I agree.
I agree with that.
Good, thank you. That was going to be my recommendation as well, so I appreciate everyone else. So we will continue this discussion and make our recommendations at the next meeting, the October 4th
Yes.
meeting.
And Mr. Chair, if I could, if any of you have language that you would like to suggest and have included in the packet for everybody to see ahead of
Yeah.
time, please send them to Karen and we'll
Yeah.
incorporate that.
Great, thank you, appreciate it. Thank you both for doing a diligent job of helping us through this.
Sure.
Okay, so we do not have any unfinished business. We move to new business, 2024 Comprehensive Plan Periodic Review.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Tiffany Spear. Oops, wrong one. Apologies.
Mhm.
The way it always goes, right? Sorry, 1 second.
No problem.
Can you reassess for about 2 minutes? If you
Yes,
don't
Mr.
mind.
Estrada.
Before I forget, so we're hoping that the other three will be able to make it next time around to provide their inputs. But can I recommend, if they are not, that they still provide inputs maybe to yourself, so we have that on file, because I think the issues here are important enough
Yeah,
that we need to get.
We'll address, if staff could address to the three commissioners that are not in attendance. If they're not going to be able to attend next October 4th, that they at least give some comments, some direction via communication with staff. So we have it for our records.
This is assuming both four are coming back.
Yeah, I will be here on the 4th. Yep.
If not, I'll provide comments for
Okay,
sure.
okay. So, yeah. Great. Yeah.
Are we in agreement on the first 1 through 11? Would that be one where we can move that through, where we're really only focusing on 12, or do you think it makes sense to wait for all?
We'll just wait for all, because there could be specifically an individual, Mr. Combs might have a couple other comments on a couple of the other, but yeah,
Forgive me, Mr. Chair. I'm still trying to
Hey,
locate
trying
what
to
I
find it.
thought I was opening it. My
Right.
apologies.
Hey, it's- Oh,
I-
oh, yeah,
Like, where's?
yeah, yeah, it's always great.
Okay.
Awesome. You can type in the whole
Oh.
web email address.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah,
like
that went on
30
and on and
things.
on, yeah.
Okay, thank you for your patience,
Mhm.
everyone.
No problem.
There we go. Okay. So this, I call it new business just because it's a new subtopic, but this continues the discussion that's been going on, believe it or not, for a year on the 2024 Comprehensive Plan Periodic Review. What we're going to be walking through on a rather high level tonight is the process that's going to be used to update all of the city's sub-area plans. So as you may already know, there are 3 sub-area plans within the city's comprehensive planning documents. First of all, the 2011 Tillicum Neighborhood Plan, and then more recently, the adoption of the Downtown Sub-Area Plan, and then the Station District Sub-Area Plan. These are all considered optional elements under the GMA requirements, and they are in place for the city to take a look at on a regular basis, not only during these tenure updates, but if you'll remember, for Downtown and Station District, the City Council asked for more frequent reviews of those sub-area plans to make sure they're working as intended. So this is a map of where those are all located. The gold is where we sit in the downtown sub-area. The brighter pink is the Station District, and then down below in Tillicum is the sub-area plan. Within that sub-area plan, there have been quite a few changes since it was adopted in 2011. First and foremost, you have along here improvements at the 2 I-5 interchanges. There's been a number of other recent planning changes within city action to rezone some properties. And so we anticipate that as this update occurs, there's going to be some significant changes to what was adopted about 10 years ago now. Last year, there was that kind of status update to say these are the number of action items that have been completed out of the total number of 68. I think it was, we had done 38 of them, if I'm remembering correctly. And so just clarifying, A, are the remainder that haven't been done yet still valid and up to date? If not, let's update that. But B, finding out from current business owners, current residents, what new priorities may they have for their neighborhood. The one thing too, in 2011, there was an assumption of a certain number of housing units and workers in the area. And obviously things have changed in the last decade. So we'll make those changes as well. And I think that's it for that one. Downtown, unless you have any questions about Tillicum?
Nope.
Okay, for downtown, this is one that's more recent and several of you were involved in the adoption of this one in 2018. What you see on the right are a couple of different maps. The first one on the left here where my cursor is, that is actually the boundary of the city's PSRC Regional Urban Center. And this is where whenever the city goes up to the PSRC and asks for transportation funding, where they are focused for the most part because it's a regional center. So right now, this is the shape. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see that it is the same as the downtown's shape. Although this year, again, if you'll remember, we just did through city council action after your recommendation, the rezone of some parcels immediately to the south. And that's going to be incorporated in 2024 into this map, and then we'll change the boundaries. In the whole process for the 2044 growth targets, there have been a number of changes that we've talked about. In this chart along the bottom, just a quick reminder, there's now not only a total number of housing units that the city is recognized as having, and then what we're supposed to be adding within the next 20 years, but that's now broken out by area median income economic bracket. So no longer is it just planned for so many houses, it's this many at this level on the way up to 120% of AMI or above. And then there's also this new calculation that's required for specifically emergency units. So what we have within the current downtown plan predates all of that. There was allocations made for both housing and jobs within the downtown. And what we'll be doing as part of this review is say, okay, if so many of them are going to be in this sub area, how many of them are going to be for each one of these AMIs? What does that make sense to do? I won't go into this in great detail, but there have been two other points when the Planning Commission considered updates to the downtown package. In 2020, it was so close to when it had been adopted, the commission said, let's just let it ride. And then in 22, we were in the middle of COVID and again, let it ride, see what's happening. But now the time is right to maybe go back in there and not only look at the housing and job allocations, but also there's been conversation at the staff level and from developers about the transportation mitigation fee that's been in place. It's always only been in the downtown, and there's been conversations with viewpoints from all sides saying why it might need to get updated. So we'll be taking a look at that as part of this process too.
Mr. Pearson.
I had a question on the previous slide.
Sure.
I think I remember accessory dwelling units are not included in these, right? Or are they? Because these numbers could be, we would think be changing quite a bit based on the new laws with, getting a certain number of accessory dwelling units, or is it just straight dwelling units and there's some anticipated amount of ADUs baked into these numbers?
It is up to the city, but to answer your question, yeah, it's more the latter, meaning the city has to do so many units at whatever level of economy, and it can be ADUs or it can be not an ADU, whatever that looks like. So in the Lakewood Station District, again, a map here just for quick reference, it's the lighter pink here along South Tacoma Way up to the 512 interchange. This was adopted in 2021, and it is focused around the Sounder Station that's located in that area. It was an urban design focus area in 2022. And so in addition to being a sub-area plan, it's been a long-term area of attention in the comprehensive plan itself. So again, looking at those housing targets and job targets, this also predated all of that stuff with AMI breakouts. So we will be doing the same process, taking a look at what makes sense here to update in terms of what types of housing go into this sub area and maybe update the jobs as well if it makes sense. One thing to note too with the Lakewood Station District review is that Lakewood Landing was anticipated as a major development within this area. And as you may have seen recently in the news, what is actually happening on the center portion of what was going to be Lakewood Landing is not. It's a reuse of an existing structure for a micro-fulfillment center. So we need to take that into account in this update as well.
Yes, Mr. Strada.
In regards to that, does the zoning remain the same? Or what was there previously to what is going to be now, basically outsourced.
The zoning as it was adopted in the sub-area plan did allow for what they're doing. It's just there had been some extensive and intensive work to market that parcel along with one on either side of it to be this larger mixed use development. And we almost had a bite and then it just didn't work. So we ended up with this instead. So looking once more at the housing targets, if you were to look at the second chart, see if I can make it any bigger for you. There we go. In downtown, about a quarter of the city's housing units were targeted for that sub area, and almost 20% were in the station district. So about 60% would be elsewhere in the city. And then in terms of jobs, it was really aggressive planning in terms of having 75% of the new jobs come to the downtown and about 13% to the station district and the remaining 12% elsewhere in the city. These assumptions, along with all of the economic bracket stuff I was just talking about, are all going to be re-examined as well. So see if this still holds and makes sense.
Yes, Mr. Estrada.
Starting the station plan. So this proposed increased housing units. Am I correct in assuming it's at the expense of some current single homes? That is to say that the area where these housing units are going to be developed, that area is presently presently has individual homes.
In some cases,
Mhm.
this is going to be a core issue as part of the 24 process, actually, Mr. Estrada, because Lakewood is a classic example of the exact areas where a for-profit developer would walk in and say, hey, there's some potential here to redevelop and raise to the ground whatever's here and start over, which in turn comes up against the anti-displacement and the racial disparity policies that we're supposed to now be adopting at the same time. So it's going to be a tricky conversation at the commission and the council level about how do we preserve existing housing, which is encouraged? How do we stop displacement, which is also encouraged? But how do we also incorporate all this additional housing density and push for growth within the city's boundaries? It's going to be a tough one.
Yes,
You're right.
Mr. Pearson.
So you'd mentioned that we almost had a mixed use development and what, did they go to somewhere else close here to do this? Why not us, I guess?
It
What-
was in part because of the proximity to the base. Some of the things that they wanted to do on the site would not have worked height wise. For instance, you can only go so high before you start to have safety issues with the flight pattern. And then some of them wanted to do, there was actually two that moved pretty far along. The other one was more of an entertainment complex that again was not in keeping first with the anticipated zoned allowed uses. And also it didn't fit with what Lakewood Landing was. So when the city was talking to the developers, it was, thank you for the idea, but this is what we're hoping you would do. And they actually left the state. They went somewhere else.
Okay, thanks.
So to finish this up, I think you've seen this map before, but our initial analysis under House Bill 1110, which is the one that said on all lots, at least 2 ADUs be allowed. And then if you're within a quarter mile of a major transit stop, 4 units, right? This map, it's a little hard to read at first just because of the number of things we're trying to show, but this kind of golden, lemon, yellow is the areas of the city where 2 units would be imposed. And then inside this, if you look at it in a certain way, it kind of looks like a letter U. And you see the darker orange areas it shows the residential areas where it would be 4 units on a lot because it's near transit. But what you now see too is these darker pink areas and then the blue hatch marked areas. These are parts of the city where 1110 would not apply because of critical areas. And the critical areas shown here are wetlands and wetland buffers, as well as lakes, landslide, and seismic risks. So the other thing that's not on this map is Gary Oaks, yes, that critical area. And all of this is dependent, of course, on a true parcel by parcel analysis if someone were to come in with a proposal. But what this shows you is that, and Lakewood's not alone in this, this is not going to apply just flat out citywide. There's going to be this type of analysis everywhere. So here in Lakewood, 1110 as it stands in this analysis level, it's basically the west side of the city is where you'd have the 2 ADUs. The east side where it's residential is where you would have the 4. And the difficulty here too, that the council has talked about briefly is, oh, I'm sorry, and down in Tillicum as well, that actually applies. But the difficulty here is it's based on the assumption for Lakewood that the BRT route coming from downtown Tacoma at this point into Lakewood will get completed. And at this point, it's paused. And once they do finally find the funding for it, it will take at least 7 years to finish construction. And then the second one, I just referred to Tillicum down here. This is assuming that the Sounder line continues down through at least DuPont. And that, as of today, is not expected to be completed until 2045, which is beyond the before the 20-year planning horizon for the comp plan. So that again is a touchy subject, and I think we're going to have a lot of feedback from the public about that as well. And then this map is a little more recent. This does incorporate now both 1110 and the ADU Bill 1337. And the other thing you'll see here are the green dots, which are where we have our Gary Oak stands. So the way to read these colors here, this medium blue, these are the areas where, after taking everything else out, we think these 2 bills would go into effect, are on the blue lots, unless the blue lot has a critical area, which is that brighter pink. There's a few spots here where you'll see kind of a beige color. Those lots, it's a potential, it's a maybe. And up here in Oak Brook, and the reason it's a maybe is there may be covenants and restrictions that limit it, and not by the racial stuff from the past, that doesn't count. But if they've got something in a recorded plat that says only so many units per acre, that's going to govern. And then there's also the lighter pink. There's some areas, for instance, down here and over to the far west side, where it's undevelopable, period, or there's already so much on the lot you can't add any more. So again, these 2 bills together, when you look at where in the city it might actually apply, and I should say too, the blue lots that have the green oaks on top, that would mean that there would be questionable applicability. You're not looking at the entire city, and you're not looking at maybe the expected result that the state legislature had. Other cities, it'll obviously be different based on their critical areas and everything else, but these are the very initial look that the city was able to do. So any questions on that?
No, I don't see any. Nope.
Okay. So we've talked about a little bit this, Mr. Pearson kind of asked this question already. The capacity that you get by creating these additional units per lot, be they an ADU or something else, yes, you can count those toward the total number of units you have to do by 2044. However, 1337, the ADU bill, and 1110, the middle housing bill, none of them talk about by economic bracket. So you still have to do that on top of it all. So this is going to be complex math. I think Lakewood will be able to figure this out. Because first of all, out of the buildable lands report of a few years ago, there was sufficient capacity found for housing. It's just where exactly all these new bills since then are going to apply and what the math turns out to say. We talked a little bit about this based on what Mr. Estrada asked, but anti-displacement. We've seen this before as well, but in green, that's the lowest risk of displacement because of economic or other reasons. The yellow is the middle risk, and then the orange is the highest risk. And as you can see, Lakeview and Springbrook, which are some of the poorest areas of the city and most diverse areas of the city, does have a high displacement risk. And this gets back into that economic analysis of a developer coming in and saying this land is prime for redevelopment versus this is affordable housing that Lakewood strives to preserve, for instance, through its rental housing safety program. So this will be an issue that we'll need to spend some more time on. I'm not going to go through all of these. These are included in your
Mhm.
packet, but these are all different criteria showing again what I think is the general conclusion that the displacement risk areas are exactly where you think they would be within the city. And I will just point out here that high risk of displacement, so this darker brown, does happen to be within every single sub-area plan. So again, that'll be part of the analysis for all three of those sub-areas as we move forward. This again is in your packet. In summary, there's a lot of questions that we need to ask and try to provide some kind of answer for. I will tell you too that right here, we did actually do some housing public outreach starting last fall into this spring, but we are re-upping the game. And Monday of this week, we had the kickoff for the Tillicum Neighborhood Plan Steering Committee, as well as those that will be talking about the other sub areas. So we're starting again with public outreach and engagement to say, this is what we have to do. This is what we have in place right now. What do you think? And start to bring all of that forward. And the intention is to work through that process right through until when this comes to you as a formal proposal on May 1st of 2024. And that concludes that presentation, unless you have any questions, Mr. Chair.
No other questions? We do not. Anything else under new business then?
No.
Okay, I don't see Mr. Our council liaison. I don't see Mr. Boki on tonight. No. Any other questions to the staff? I do have a couple of comments, if I could. I addressed this a couple meetings ago, but I did have a conversation with the mayor. I made a mention that there's 4 individuals, possibly term is ending. Myself, Ryan Pearson, Paul Wagaman, and Brian Parsons. I know at least one of the individuals, Ryan Pearson or Paul Wagaman, they're both running for city council, so at least one is going to be a vacancy. As far as the other, just make a mention, if you would, to the staff kind of looking ahead. I will make an announcement tonight that I will not be reapplying for the position. A 5-year commitment is kind of long, but also I think I've served this commission and the Planning Advisory Board for quite a few years. So I mentioned to the mayor it might have to, the notice might have to go out sooner than anticipated there could be a pretty good shift in the amount of members. So I do make a suggestion that if the individuals are planning on reapplying, to let the staff know so we know how many. So yes, Mr. Strada.
As you recall, when we had a joint council planning commission meeting, when we presented our plan for the year, the question from one of the council members, I believe was Councilman Ranstetter, asked whether we felt that it would be if we extended our tenure, would that be acceptable to those members that would be affected this year? Because he was looking at how extensive of a plate we had, shall we say, for the end of the year. So I don't know if that plays into it, the individuals who will stay on or are eligible to stay on, whether they want to possibly be extended.
Yep. Yeah, I did. The mayor did mention that to me, that would be a possibility. I did mention that even if they propose that extension, I still would not probably reapply. So that means there's for sure going to be 2 openings. And just the amount of knowledge, the amount of things that we've done, I would hate to see just at the last in December to have the notice go out and try to pick individuals and then get up to speed with, this is pretty complex.
Yeah.
And we've done a lot of work, but yeah, I just want to make a mention that. So that's one thing. And then the other is, I will be here October 4th, but it looks like I thought I was going to miss quite a few meetings, but it looks like I'm only going to miss October 18th. October 18th. That's the only one. I'm going to be traveling quite a bit in the next 3 months. But I think I'll make all the rest of them. So, yes, Mr. Strada.
I will also be gone the 18th.
Mhm. So any other comments then from the commissioners? No other additional comments from staff?
If I could please ask you to stay there, I need to take a picture of you for next Wednesday's volunteer recognition event. And I'm assuming you were all invited, but the city, after COVID hiatus, is bringing back the volunteer recognition event next Wednesday night. It'll be at the rotunda of the McGavick Center. You're all more than welcome to attend. Hope you will, particularly those of you who may not be there next year, or be here next year, I should say. But if you can't make it, just let us know that so we can tell the other staff. But if you don't mind, I'll just take a picture really quickly once you adjourn.
Okay. Appreciate it. So.
I'll just, yeah, I appreciate you being on the chair and not making anyone else do it for the past. You've done a great job and
Yeah.
I appreciate your service.
Okay, no problem.